Happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary. Pour a cheerful toast and fill it, happy anniversary. But be careful you don't spill it, happy anniversary.
Okay, this
Happy anniversary, happy anniversary, happy anniversary.
this is not the Flintstones. This is the Growing in Grace 15th anniversary podcast. I'm Joel Brueseke, along with Mike Kapler. Kind of a milestone here, to put it very lightly. 15 years of doing the Growing in Grace podcast. February 10th, 2005 was the very first, it was when the podcast was born, I guess you could put it that way. And so 15 years later, here we are, still doing it. Mike Kapler, it's been a pleasure doing this whole podcast thing, Growing in Grace podcast thing with you for the last 15 years.
You know, after 15 years, I'll bet there are some people disappointed that the Flintstones aren't on right now instead of us. But, and I just got to say this, because I was joking around about it before we started. Go back and listen to the Happy Anniversary song there again from the Flintstones, because, you know, a lot of times when you're listening to recording artists doing songs and they have background vocals behind them in the chorus especially, sometimes it's actually just the lead singer having their voice mixed over and over again, so it sounds like background singers. I think that sounds like Joel Brueseke there on that song. I know it can't be because it was recorded, you know, before you were born, but still, just listen to it and see if you don't hear the mixture of the Breeze Man.
I don't know. I didn't hear it, but I'll have to listen to it again. I'll have to meditate on that until it gets into my heart.
All right. 15 years, Joel, did you ever think when we started this thing that we would be doing this now with a worldwide audience all these years later? You know, I guess tens of thousands of downloads per month, and the correspondence that we've gotten over the years from so many that were in some cases very emotional, very hard to read as they emailed or wrote to us. And at other times, we were so encouraged by our podcast, our humble little podcast here at growingingrace.org, having some sort of a positive impact on people where they could more easily begin to trust in Christ instead of themselves, I think, is part of our mission here.
Right, yeah, that's been so awesome. I mean, because when this whole thing started, and we might get into this, we haven't really predetermined what we're going to be talking about on this on this anniversary special, or if we'll do one or two or what, but
we might take 15 years just to do our anniversary special.
There we go. Well, we took 15 years to do our first season, so and season 1 continues here. But I forgot where I was going with this. But yeah, just hearing from people from all around the world, you know, people have been it's not just in the United States where we're out of, but all around the world there are churches and ministries that I think so many of them have, you know, good hearts, good intentions, and I know many of them don't. I know there are some abusive churches and ministers and leaders out there, but for whatever reason, people have gotten involved in one way or another in ministries that teach legalism, basically the ministry of death and condemnation, mixing the law in with grace. And if you mix law in with grace, you've got law, because they don't mix. Just a little bit of law leavens the whole lump, as Paul says, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. And so people have been hurt. Again, whether the abusers have been intentional, whether those who have hurt them have been intentional or not, and they've felt unworthy. They have felt like God is at a distance from them. They have felt like they need to work their way back to God. They've sinned too much. They don't know where they stand with God. They don't know, you know, all these things, and people live a worried life when the gospel is good news and is meant to show God's love for us. And so all these years on the podcast, that's where I was going. When this thing started, we didn't really have any intentions of going worldwide. I mean, I knew it was going to be on the internet, and so we knew that that's going worldwide. But I don't think we had a clue that we would hear from the Netherlands, that we would hear from Russia or the UK or anywhere else in the world, where we've heard from all
even California.
Yeah, even that country. Even that foreign country. Yeah. And so, yeah, it has been really good to hear from people from all over.
Joel and I met in radio. We were doing contemporary Christian music radio, and it was pretty edgy for its time. We played a lot of stuff that most Christian stations wouldn't play, or they would at the very least, they would reserve it for a certain time slot on the weekend at 2 a.m. or something. So we played a lot of edgier stuff. Not just heavy metal type stuff, but just more, edgier. It was more contemporary. It was more upbeat. And, I began to learn early on, Joel, because I started radio before you did, Christian radio in that sense, back in the 80s when we were mixing in Petra and Stryper and different Christian rock artists into our contemporary mix. I began to learn early on what it meant to be persecuted the Bible way. And what I mean by that is religious people. That's where our persecution was coming from. We were being criticized up and down, right and left. We were of the devil. We weren't of God. And all we were doing on there was trying to promote the message of Jesus Christ, and playing music in between some exhortations as DJs. But boy, we took it on the chin, and people were being told not to support us and all that. Well, eventually time went on, and contemporary Christian music became more acceptable within the church industry, and so it became much more popular in the 90s and thereafter. But Joel and I met in probably 1994.
Yep.
He came on to the station. We just relaunched a Christian radio station, and Joel came up, and he can tell the story if he wants to, but the nutshell version here is that he came up and he became a volunteer on the air and eventually became a part-time staff. But he came at a time where I had just come to a crossroads in my life with God, because I got saved at a young age. And I knew it was the gift of salvation was just that. It was meant to be a gift. It was meant to be something that was free, something we couldn't earn. I mean, we used all of those talking points when we went out sharing the gospel with others on college campus or street ministry or whatever. Whenever we were trying to lead somebody to Jesus, we would tell them, well, you can't earn it. But there was something built into my brain, Joel, something the way my mind worked, the way I adapted to the Christian message, especially once I got around the church crowd, is that I thought this was all dependent upon me, and that I could lose my salvation, and that God might not be happy with me, and where do I really stand with God today? All of these things. And when I felt like I was doing okay, I felt good. I felt confident. When I wasn't doing so good, or I didn't feel like I was doing enough, then I started to wonder where am I really at here? And it was a constant is just a constant cycle of rededicating, recommitting, trying harder, and hoping that it was going to be enough. And so there was just a lot of double talk and a lot of double-mindedness there, You ever watch Looney Tunes and you see Daffy Duck get his beak blown off? It was like talking out of both sides of my mouth. He'd just spin that thing around and start talking Christianese again, I guess. That's what I was doing. I was like the spiritual Daffy Duck. And
going to write that one down.
And so in 1994, things began to change for me. And that's where you came along, as I was so excited now about this new message of grace that had just completely encompassed me. It was quite different from many of the things that I had thought about through the 20 plus years of my Christian life. And so you started hearing from me about some of this stuff, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, because I had come into the radio station, like you say, kind of out of the blue. It was something, and this is I say this because just to say how this is such a God thing, in that I had never had any intentions of being any part of being on the air in front of a microphone at a radio station. I wasn't pursuing the dream. It wasn't my dream at all. and we've shared in the past about how this happened, but God, long story short, God led me to this radio station through nothing that I could have planned myself. And there I was. I found myself as a volunteer there. And indeed, you had been going through what you were going through, learning the various things that you were learning about God's grace. And there I was, a willing, listening ear. And the things that you were telling me that you were learning were resonating with me. And it was, it was like I understood what you were saying. It's like I already knew these things to be true, but nobody that I knew was teaching this stuff. And no church that I had ever been a part of was teaching it. But yet internally, I think from my own Bible reading, I think that I had seen these things, or at least glimpsed them, had a glimpse at them. But again, with nobody teaching them, I don't know if I would have latched onto it or not. But you started sharing these things with me, little bites at a time, as we were doing the ministry at the radio station. I'd be perhaps, because I had 2 jobs, so I would maybe be leaving out the door to go head to my other job, and you would share some things with me. We'd stand in the doorway and talk. And again, the things that you were saying were resonating with me. And then the story I love to share, I've shared it a lot of times, so I'm sure I'll share it many times, that the thing that really caught me was one day you said, in the middle of what we were talking about, I wasn't expecting anything extra or big that day, but you just said, God isn't angry with us anymore. And that just, it melted me right there and then, and it hit me, and that I think was the beginning of my transition into, yes, I'm gonna start to fully embrace this thing, this whole grace thing. And so we're definitely going to have to go more than one episode on this, because we're about to the end of this one. But the thing was that so I started learning this stuff. My wife and I, we left the church we were going to, began attending the church that you had, again, started going to, where you were hearing this message. And for 3 solid years, I remember I sat, he would teach for an hour. The pastor would preach for an hour every time, and I was just sucked into the whole thing. It was awesome in a good way. I mean, I never felt like, man, he's going long. I never felt like that. It always felt so, I felt so refreshed. I felt good about who I was. And in church, I had always left feeling bad about myself in previous times. And the gospel is supposed to help you to feel good, because it means that God loves you, and that through nothing you've done, Jesus Christ has accepted you. So, 15 years, Cap. 15 years. We'll have to hop on another week, next week for this, because, like I said, the time is up for this one. So, thank you, the listener, for coming along with us, whether you're a new listener or you've been with us a long time. And we'll be sharing more, obviously, as time goes on here on Growing in Grace.
This has been Growing in Grace with Mike Kapler and Joel Brueseke, heard online through various internet sources around the world each week. To access hundreds of past programs, visit graceroots.org. Share it with a friend and listen again next week for more Growing in Grace.